Hey guys, Jay here. Another project. This is a lawnmower that I just picked up for free. The guy said it wasn't running, he's not sure why. He said it had been flooded during the hurricane last year, much like mine was. Since mine's running, I felt pretty confident that I could get this thing going again. He seems to think it's an electrical issue. Said he flushed the crankcase already for the oil and everything. I have my doubts. Just checking this out. I had pulled this off previously. Found there is no air filter in here, so I believe he has tried to do something. But looking at the fuel filter, it looks like there's water in there. I'm guessing there's water in the gas tank. We'll flush that out completely, put in some new gas. The other thing I noticed is that the seat cutoff switch here, it's supposed to cut the lawnmower off if there's nobody on the seat. Those wires are missing, so somebody's definitely been messing with this thing already. So this might be a little bit more complicated than just a standard troubleshooting of a stock lawnmower. So there's just no air filter in here at all. You can kind of see the water line. I tested the battery. The battery is only reading 7 volts right now. So let's see if I can get this thing in here again. Another quick test. Yeah, we're reading 7 volts. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull off this battery, get it charging. And in the meantime, I have a brand new motorcycle battery that I had purchased for a different project. But I'm going to get this thing in there. It should have plenty of juice to get this thing to crank over if it'll run. So first, get this battery on the charger, see if it'll come back to life. Then we'll start troubleshooting this thing. So I've started tearing into this a little bit, and the more I'm looking into it, the more I'm thinking this piece of equipment's life as a mower may be finished. Looking at the deck, it's a pretty decent size hole there is rusted through. Bolt here is replaced by just welding that directly on. You can see there's a lot of rust under the paint here. This pulley over here, I was wondering what in the world is that until I get over, actually look at the bearing here. That does not look like a serviceable bearing. And certainly not any life left in it, at least. The pulley that actually activates this cable is just about to snap. There's a lot of other rust down here. So I'm halfway tempted to just not put the deck back on, maybe just toss that. Either use this as a lawn tractor or possibly as a donor for a go-kart if I can get this engine running. So I'm going to keep tearing into it. I think the next step is going to be to get the body off. Started looking through here. There's a little wiring connector, real hard to see here. But right back in there, there's another little wiring connector. I think that's actually the kind of the starter relay, if I'm looking at it right. The wiring runs from there back up here to the starter itself. Turning the key, you can kind of see the back side of this whole, I don't know if it'll focus. You can see the back side of the key assembly right there. I've got to get access to this, which means I probably need to pull this panel off. But I think the easiest thing to do is just going to get this body off first. So even with the body off, I should be able to figure out what's going on with some of the wires, where they're located in here. Figure out what happened to the wires that are supposed to be attached to the seat switch right here. Kind of go from there. So I'll get that off real quick. Alright, so I started checking things out back here. This is the starter relay that was back here. It's obviously very rusty. I'm guessing there's not a great connection here, but just out of curiosity, the side going to the battery here, I've got the negative, the ground hooked up to the battery here. I tried touching the starter positive here, and the engine cranks over. So that part's good. These are the signal wires that came from the starter switch. Obviously one comes from there and the other one's just a ground. Put 12 volts across here. It should bridge these internally. I'm not sure if this thing is any good. I haven't hooked up a test a test setup with it yet to put 12 volts on it to see if it'll click. But one thing I did notice, there's a fuse on here. This thing is very badly, I mean, there's corrosion all over the place. And there's this 20 amp fuse, and sure enough, looking inside, this thing appears to be completely blown. So I'm going to try replacing that fuse. Once that's done, these appear to be the wires that went to the seat switch, which from looking at it, what it does, if these are closed, it automatically stops the engine. So leaving these disconnected should just allow it to run normally. But I am going to test that setup just to make sure that that's not causing our issue. I'm going to see if I can get all this wired back up the right way. I'm going to test continuity in a few places, maybe try and do a voltage test on this just to make sure it's clicking. If nothing else, I can always replace this. These are pretty generic parts. Alright, so I've been doing some troubleshooting, and I was able to find out that this little starter relay solenoid does work. Oh, sorry if I shake. So what I've done here, got a little alligator clip lead clamped to the positive terminal in the battery. I'm going to use the other end here on the relay, and so you can hear it. It clicks over and turns the starter. So I know that solenoid is good. So my issue of this not wanting to start with the key is either somewhere in the key switch, which I disassembled and cleaned a little bit, and you know, it's just not getting a signal to this wire. We've got ground here. Now one thing I noticed, this wire coming off the battery here, this is getting very hot when I jump this. So I'm thinking I'll probably need to replace this cable, get some new terminals, and just run a new cable over here, get this all cleaned up. It looks like this corrosion is probably causing quite a bit of resistance there, but it is allowing power to cross enough that the engine is turning over that way. So the next thing I need to do is go through this switch and figure out when the key is in various positions, if it's getting wiring, or if it's getting power to the correct pin on here, if there's a good connection. I get the feeling there's not, which I may end up pulling a wiring diagram and just wiring in a separate switch. This replacement switch, when I looked them up online, they're between $65 and $100 depending on where you get them. I'm not sure for something like this that it's worth it to even bother with a stock replacement. This mower is about 12 years old. If the information here is to be believed, it says somewhere on here. Let's see, build date 2007. Okay, yeah, so this thing is 11 years old right now. I already showed some of the issues it has with the deck, and I'm going to see if I can get that repaired at least to be functional, but I'm thinking just a standard toggle switch with a push button starter should work fine on this. So I'm going to get this cleaned up, get it back together, and we'll keep troubleshooting elsewhere, see if I can figure out how to make this work. Alright, so I'm working on the ignition switch right now. The only thing that I've got continuity between is the main power and the starter signal when I twist the key. There's also continuity between what appears to be the main power and what I'm assuming is kind of the stop switch in the off position, which makes me think that's just a battery kill. Alright, sorry, an engine kill function. But if I pop this open, and this is what the inside looks like. So it looks like I've got several pins that are not getting the connection they need. And get this all cleaned up and back together. Probably get some dielectric grease in there to kind of keep it lubricated and keep water from causing any corrosion issues. And then we'll test it again. Okay, so this might seem like kind of a silly setup, but I've got my multimeter set up here to test continuity. So I've got one probe plugged in to the wire that should be going to the starter solenoid. I've got the other one plugged in to the back side of the starter switch. This orange wire here should be making contact there. Now there are a couple of safety switches. The one that's open right now is actually attached to the brake. Requires you to push the brake to be able to start the tractor. So with this, yeah, that's in there. So if I push the brake, which I'm going to push with my leg here. Alright, we are showing continuity with the brake pedal pressed. So I'm going to hook the switch back up real quick. Alright, so I'm probing the pin on the back of the starter. So that pin should beep when I hit the brake with my foot. Yep. So I'm showing continuity on the back side. It looks like the switch itself is not making contact on the inside when I turn the key. So I can do some more testing on this, a little bit more cleaning, but I'm thinking this switch may just be toast. So I'm going to keep playing with it off camera, see if I can get something figured out, and I will let you know if I do, or if I end up just going with a standalone switch. Alright, I think I'm about to have to call it a night. So I started doing some probing along the backside here. On the switch, I've got continuity between A1 and the orange wire here, which is the starter, when I turn the key. The fact I've got continuity there means it should be sending a signal to the starter. But I've got two power wires here. I'm getting continuity with the battery on this wire, but I'm getting nothing from this. This should be a power supply. This should be live 12 volts. I've got an issue somewhere else. So I started looking around. I've got this connector down here that used to be connected. You can see there used to be 4 wires connected here. I've got this 4th one here. It looks like it had completely corroded through at the pin. And that wire has power. Probably see it sparking right there. So that's a live wire that is not connected to anything. Thinking that might have something to do with this. However, on the other side here, you can see this orange wire hanging off. On the other side, there are supposed to be 4 wires. That orange one broke off. Issue number 2. I mean, if you want to count those 2 wires as separate things. Let's call that one in the top left here pin number 1. So when we look at this one, that should be top right. These interface. You can see there is no pin actually going into that hole to correspond with the other plug there. But there is a pin in the middle here. So I have no idea what the previous owner of this thing did with the wiring. Obviously there are things that are not making a possible connection because I've got, you know, wires completely detached here that should be making contact, but I'm not even sure what's supposed to be connected here. I'm going to be pulling up a wiring diagram, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on this, try and figure out what's supposed to go where, and get back on this later. I think I'm going to have to call it here for tonight at least, and man, get this thing running. Once I get the electrical sorted, everything on the engine should be pretty straightforward. I mean, it's going to be an issue of testing compression, just to make sure that there's not so much corrosion in the cylinder that it's, you know, not going to be able to make any power. I'll have to get this carburetor off of here, and you can kind of see where the water line is. I'm pretty sure this thing had water in it. The linkage moves pretty freely, but I'm sure everything in that bowl is completely nasty. If this hasn't been run since it flooded, then I'm sure that thing's been sitting for at least a year with just nasty stuff in it. So that'll be a pretty standard carburetor cleaning. Have to get the gas tank flushed, and then start troubleshooting. I guess actually starting the engine, but I could just try and jumper it and, you know, get it running. But I want to try and figure out the wiring first. If I have to make kind of bypasses and hacks on it, I can do that. But I'm going to give it a shot at getting it working correctly first. Alright, so one last quick note. I was able to find this wiring diagram on Toro's website. So for these wires I was looking at, I've got the red, white, and yellow from this harness here, the one that was messed up, all on here. And it's easy to see that the yellow wire goes to the ignition module, which I was able to match up with a white wire that's coming off the little coil right here. The red wire goes to the afterfire solenoid, which, from what I can tell from watching videos and stuff, is actually just a little solenoid inside the carburetor. Looks like it's a fuel cutoff. It opens up when you turn the power on to let fuel flow, and it's, I guess, supposed to cut off fuel automatically. The red-white goes to the voltage regulator. Now, they only show one wire coming out of the voltage regulator. So we've, of course, I've already put the starter back on. Either way, you've got two wires going in for the AC that's generated by the engine. That's shown here. But I have two wires coming out, a purple and an orange. Now I think what I need is the black wire that isn't shown on here connects to the orange wire, because on the connectors that I cut off, the purple wire here was connected to the red-white wire that came out. So I've got right now the black wire and the orange wire connected. Got the purple and the red-white, which I believe is the positive voltage feed back to the battery, which would make the orange and black kind of the ground of that circuit. And then I've got the red hooked up to the red and the yellow hooked up to the white. This is a wiring connector. I just took off an old wiring harness I had sitting around from a motorcycle. So I've got little heat shrink crimp connectors on there. Got that all wired up. So next we're going to move on to the carburetor and see if we can get this thing to run. Appreciate you watching. If this is interesting, or you want to see more like this, drop me a like. I guess drop me a dislike if you think I'm going about this the wrong way. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I'm gonna keep posting stuff whether you subscribe or not, but if you want to see it, I would like you to subscribe, hit the notification thing so that you'll actually get notified when I do post. Anyway, catch you later.